Solomon tells us, inspired by the Spirit, he said, when you sit down to eat with a ruler, I mean, it's an honor. Sit down with a ruler. He said, consider carefully what is before you. In other words, act appropriately to the occasion. He said, and put a knife to your throat if you're a man given to appetite. In other words, if you're a scarfer, and the food just gets there and you just start reaching over everybody and you just slobbing food down your face and, gobbling it all down and all. Solomon just says, listen, let me just tell you something. If you're ever in that place, just don't act like that. You can get away with it at home, but you won't get away with it someplace else. And so he said, put a knife to your throat if you're a man given to appetite. And someone has translated, they said, stab thy gluttony. That's the way you're going to act. Grab a Big Mac on the way there so you're not starving to death and you don't make a fool of yourself there. And so just show some, whatever it takes to show restraint. And it's just good manners, isn't it? Just to be sensitive to the environment that we're in. There's a little more to it than that. He says, to be cautious in those kinds of environments. Do not desire the ruler's delicacies, his fancy foods that he puts before you, for they are a deceptive food. Sometimes you can find yourself in a place where you've been invited to a meal to eat, and the whole purpose is manipulation. The whole purpose is to do something to you. And it's better to find out that that's what's happening to you when you've only had like a piece of bread rather than when you've cleared the whole table. Because if you eat a whole bunch and all, then you can feel it indebted to the person for whatever kind of a scam they're trying to run on you. Sometimes a person will do that in order to get information. They get you kind of fat and sassy, and you've had, plenty to eat, and then a nice dessert, and a good gourmet coffee, and then they'll say, well, tell me, Damian, what do you know about such and such? And if you were a little bit hungry, you'd be a little more tight-lipped, but, you're feeling pretty good like Thanksgiving, and, well, what do you want to know, and you just start saying, got any more of that pie? Kind of a deal. And so he's just saying, to be careful. Today we have a term for verses 1 through 3, and it's called wining and dining. Happens all the time, doesn't it? You're being wined and dined, not because you're so special, you're so wonderful, you have something that's of value to the other person. So he says, just be wise as it relates to these things. Verse 4, do not overwork to be rich. Now this is an important thing for us today, living in California in the United States of America. Now all through the Scriptures, all through the book of Proverbs, there's tremendous praise and commendation given to hard work. But there is a thing called overworking, and a person has to be careful of that. Now, there can be seasons where God puts us and we're working overtime like crazy and all, and those kinds of things. But we're never to overwork to be rich. That is not a high goal in life, to simply be rich. That is not worth giving your life for. Notice what he says afterwards. He says, because of your own understanding, cease. Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings, and they fly away like an eagle toward heaven. And so that's the way that money is, isn't it? You finally get a little money put away, and then what happens? The most expensive part on your car, breaks or something, doesn't it? And it's just like you're counting on that for something, and then you can just see it. Just took wings and just flew right out to the auto shop or to whatever it might be. Money, it comes in and it goes out. It's too uncertain. And it's always too uncertain to sacrifice your health for, and your family for, and your marriage for. And so often the person that overworks to become rich sacrifices all of those things, and then when they lose all of those things, Finally, the riches fly away so effortlessly, and now he's instructed by the folly of his decisions. It's not worth it. Money is not worth the loss of those things. Do not eat the bread of a miser. So if a tightwad invites you over for dinner, the stingy kind of a guy. And sometimes, they can be known for that. And so if you get invited over by a stingy person, he said, don't eat their bread. In other words, don't eat the meal, but maybe don't even eat the first course, nor desire his delicacies, the appetizers that he brings out. For as he thinks in his heart, so he is. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. And so here's this tightwad kind of a guy, but as you're eating the food, he's watching every bit you eat. He said, look at how much that guy eats. And he's saying, no, have some more, eat and drink some more. And then when you do, he's going, man, I can't believe, anyone with any brains wouldn't eat that much food on the thing. And there are just some people, they'll say one thing, and then you thought you had a nice dinner and a nice night of fellowship and conversation, and you leave, and the next thing you know, the guy has told everyone, man, he came over and ate me out of house and home. All you did was you just kept taking up his offer. But if you're dealing with a person that's stingy like that, all they can see is that the fellowship and the opportunity to bless another person isn't as valuable as keeping their resources to themselves. Then God says, be careful. Don't, in that kind of a situation, because it'll turn around on you. He said in verse 8, the morsel, I don't know how Solomon knew this, but he said, the morsel which you have eaten, you'll vomit up and waste your pleasant words. In other words, you'd like to give it back to him. Every bit of it. All 6 courses of it. Everything he piled on the plate. You say, man, when that happens, now it's in your body. And now it's going to be in your body a while, this thing that somebody begrudged. And you just would go, man, I wish I didn't have it. If I could return it to you. Well, let me see. Maybe I could. If I could get it back to you, I'd be, glad to do that. But it just turns like a stone in your stomach. So he says, be careful of that kind of a person so that it doesn't get turned around on you. And you waste your pleasant words. In other words, again, you thought it was a nice night of conversation, and the whole time the guy was, counting the calories you were taking from his cupboard. Do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of your words. And so, here's another situation. He's just talked about pleasant words or sweet words wasted. And here in verse 9 is another illustration of sweet words wasted. As we share the truths of the Lord and the things of the Lord to people, there can come that time where there's just that recognition that I've shared what I can share here and I've said what I can say here at this point in time. They're not listening anymore. They're despising me as it relates to this thing, and there can be a release, not to cast the pearls before swine. And so they're not ready to listen to anymore. So don't wait till they have to, hit you with a right cross to get us to stop. And so, the wisdom that we have, the gospel that we share, and those kinds of things, there is a place where you look at a situation, or the way that I try to do it with the Lord is that if the Lord keeps me wanting to stay in a situation, even though the guy is ready to hammer me, then I'll stay in it. But if he releases me off of it and nothing's happening, I'll release off it and then wait for him to bring the next Christian into the person's life and follow up on it, or maybe a later season he'll allow me to do there. But there just comes a place where sometimes it becomes a waste of time and you just back off from it and seek the Lord related to it. Do not remove the ancient landmark, nor enter the fields of the fatherless. The fatherless were the orphans. In other words, they were the powerless, and you could really take advantage of them easily, and God said, don't do that. Don't take advantage of the powerless. For their Redeemer is mighty, and he will plead their cause against you. When he talks about their Redeemer, you see it's capitalized, and God is referring to himself as their Redeemer. The word there is the word that means goel, the kinsman redeemer. And so God is saying, if you try to rip these orphans off, and you try and steal from the powerless, and you look around and you go, I'm going to rip them off. They don't have any bigger brothers or big uncles or any powerful people to protect them, and I'm going to do it. God says, just bear in mind that they have a kinsman redeemer, and that kinsman redeemer is me. And the goel was the avenger of blood. And so he said, lay off them. And that was the way that it was in the Old Testament. If you took and you killed someone from another family or took advantage of them or something like that, then the situation was out of their hands, then the nearest relative to that person that was hurt or killed, it was their responsibility to avenge the dead person. And so God, if they had a big brother, or they had, Hulk Hogan or something as a cousin or something, that would be fearful to know that I'm not going to mess with them because I don't want to mess with their family. That's what God is saying. Don't mess with them because I look out for them. I think it's a great warning. I wish that more would take it seriously. It's just a very hard thing to see the powerless continually ripped off and taken advantage of. Verse 12, apply your heart to instruction and your ears to the words of knowledge. There's no higher use of the heart or the ears than to apply it to instruction and knowledge. Now, the key to this proverb is the word apply. And so it's talking about diligence here. And it's saying that learning comes through diligence. Learning comes through hard work. There's not an easy way. And so instead of looking for the easy way to get ahead in life, work hard. And that's how you'll get ahead in life. God honors that. Do not withhold correction from a child, for if you beat him with a rod, he will not die. If you spank him, you shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. And so a spanking is intended not to, beat him in the sense that we use the term beat. It's a correction. It's to steer a child. And children, for the most part, it's one degree or another, but they tend to have a rebellious heart as it relates to different things. I don't know if you've noticed that in raising your children. Well, somewhere that rebellion has to get dealt with. And as we've shared before, it's either going to get dealt with in juvenile hall, or it's going to get dealt with when they lose their first 5 jobs, or it's going to get dealt with in jail. Somewhere it's going to get dealt with. And it's best that the parents deal with it, and deal with it firmly and strongly, so that rebellion is put out of their heart. And then bigger than all of the, physical consequences is that as they're broken, not their spirit, but their rebellion, it'll deliver his soul from hell. It'll make him teachable as it is to the ways of the Lord. My son, if your heart is wise, my heart will rejoice. Indeed, I myself, yes, my inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak right things. And so he talks, my son. And so it's the joy of a father over his son who, says the right thing, does the right thing, and he's, given himself to instruction. He's made something of his life through good, godly, hard work rather than, giving his life to a life of rebellion. And so just the blessing that a parent has on looking at their child who's chosen the right way, to be a godly influence in life. Do not let your heart envy sinners. Why? Because their pleasure is short-lived. But in the fear of the Lord continue all day long, for surely there is a hereafter, and your hope will not be cut off. So don't look at the evil person. Wow, look how much money they're making, and look how much candy bars they have, and whatever level you're in this room on, and whatever kind of a thing. Look at how much of this and that and all. And God's saying here, live for eternity. That stuff's going to be gone. However long we live our 70, or we live 100 years old, or we live 30 years old, or whatever God gives us to live, or whenever He returns for us. And once we head into eternity, we hear about life being a vapor, and it's like, yeah. And a lot of this stuff's going to really crystallize for us when we're in eternity. And a sense of, man, I'm going to give anything, waste my life related to anything, as it relates to the temporal things, when I could have lived for eternity, this side of glory. And so an exhortation to live in the light of eternity and live for eternity. Hear, my son, and be wise, and guide your heart in the way. And I like that a lot. He says, you guide your heart. Don't let a television guide your heart. Don't let your friends guide your heart. Don't let the media guide your heart. Don't let anybody guide your heart. You guide your heart. And let the Lord guide your heart. I like that. We need that. We're just like, I'm just being washed away. I can't do anything, And God says, you guide. You make those choices. Don't let people make those choices for you, and then you have to deal with all of the consequences of it. So be wise and guide your heart in the way. Don't mix with wine bibbers, drunkards, or with gluttonous eaters of meat. See, a face is. I'm getting a face here. For the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and drowsiness will clothe a man with rags. Now, in those days, drunken parties, they were just drunken feasts. And so you'd have the meat, and then you'd have the drink, and then you'd be too messed up to work the next day. That's a quick way to end up dressed in rags. That's a good way to end up, getting fired at work. Listen to your father who begot you. In other words, our fathers have something to teach us in the Lord if they're godly. And do not despise your mother when she's old. So respect for parents and respect for older parents. Now, the thing about a mother when she's old is, in this proverb, is she's already shown her character in raising you and sacrificing for you and giving up for you in order to raise you into adult life. But that's only half the test. She passed her test. The other half is then when she is old, are we going to despise her, or are we going to reverence her and respect her? And now the test is on me. Am I going to sacrifice? Am I going to do what's necessary to honor her in a way that's right before the Lord? Buy the truth and do not sell it. In other words, whatever it takes to get it, whatever it costs you, get it and don't give it up for anything. And also wisdom and instruction and understanding. The father of the righteous will rejoice greatly, and he who begets a wise child will delight in him. Let your father and your mother be glad, and let her who bore you rejoice. The best gift that a child can ever give their parent is to grow up to be righteous in the ways of the Lord and wise as to the things of the Lord. My son, verse 26, give me your heart and let your eyes observe my ways. And Solomon's saying, son, look at my life, study my life. It's been a safe life. It's been a good life, hasn't it? Because of the way the Lord's worked in my life. So he says, take a look and study my life. Be a student of life. For a harlot, he's going to warn him now against falling for a prostitute or an immoral woman. For a harlot is a deep pit. And the idea here is a pit that's easy to fall into, but hard to get out of. That's the way a lot of pits are, aren't they? And you can fall into them like that, and then getting out of them is a lot harder. And that's the way that it is with sexual immorality. Boom, you can fall into it fast, and then getting out of it isn't nearly as easy. He likens her to a seductress as a narrow well. And so their wells, if they had a well, they didn't just leave it open for a bunch of, rabbits to fall in it and rot them or whatever. They would cover them. And so you'd have a well that would be covered by straw or whatever. You're just walking along, minding your own business, reading a comic book or whatever, and you go along and you step over the straw, whoom, right down in the well. And if it's a deep well, you're going to hit every edge of the well all the way down. You hit the bottom, you're going to be a beat-up mess, aren't you? And so what he's saying is, stay alert. Stay alert as it relates to sexual immorality. Because, man, the fall can happen fast, and you can end up massively damaged so quickly. And it's true, we know it today, don't we? And so the danger of it, don't fall into it. There's a lot of harm that can occur there. She also lies in wait for a victim. Now, sometimes that's hard to think of. is that you're just going along, a person's going along in life, and that's why Solomon likens, the man earlier in the book of Proverbs as a ox that's being led to the slaughter. You think, well, she's gonna, she thinks I'm a player and she's gonna, deal with me and everything because I'm so good looking and I'm so this and I'm so that and all. Hey, you don't know that she's not some grudge woman out there. She's just waiting for a victim. And that's what she does with her life. She hates men. She hates family. She hates whatever. And she's just waiting for a victim. And that's a good thing to think about. That might not be attracted to you at all. She's just looking for someone stupid enough to fall for, and then she increases the unfaithfulness among men. And so that's a heavy thought, but it's a real thought, isn't it? There are people out there that are just looking to destroy our lives. How much more those of us who know the Lord? And Satan's just waiting there with 1,000,001 vessels to use to try and lure us into destroying the precious work that he's done in our life. Now he begins to talk about drunkenness in his description of the alcoholic. It's fascinating that the latest statistics as it relates to alcoholism in the United States is that there's between 18 and 20 million alcoholics in the United States of America. That's in a population of about 250 million or something. So 18 to 20 million. And so, and now they're talking about how high the rates are among women that they haven't, really recognized. And it's interesting that for every ounce of alcohol that a person drinks, it kills 10,000 dendrites in the brain. That's something? This kills 10,000 dendrites in the brain. Now, we've got millions and millions and millions and millions of dendrites, but all you got to do is just get a little bit older to understand you need every dendrite you have. And you'll be glad you spared those dendrites. So don't be wiping out dendrites foolishly early in life. But again, the statistic is that for every person that takes that first drink of alcohol in the United States of America, 14% of them will never break off of it the rest of their life. They will become alcoholics. That is a very high percentage, and that's Russian roulette. That's right up there with Russian roulette in terms of the danger. And so he warns about it. Who has woe? Drunkard, alcoholic. Who has sorrow? You ever want to hear a tale of woe? Just get a drunk talking to you, an alcoholic. Who has contentions? In other words, always in a fight with someone. Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Beat up for no good reason. And who has redness of eyes, bloodshot eyes? And so, sixfold description of the alcohol. Those who linger long at the wine, and those who go in search of mixed wine, something a little bit stronger. Solomon says, don't look at the wine when it's red and when it's sparkling in the cup and when it swirls around smoothly. Sounds like a commercial, doesn't it? He said, don't look at just the commercials for alcohol. Don't just look at the beer commercials. You're not going to get one of those girls by drinking beer. It's just not going to happen. You're going to get one of those frogs. That's what you're going to get. So, but that's what he's talking about here. They've got all of the advertisements and they've got all of that stuff going on, and it just looks all so neat and everything. And Solomon's just saying to his son, just go someplace where the drunks hang out. Just go look at their life. Don't look at how it begins. Everything looks glamorous where it begins. Most sin it's pleasurable for a season, the Bible says. It looks glamorous for a while. But then you notice those next three words in verse 32. At the last. That's what you want to look at. At the last. It bites like a serpent and it stings like a viper. In other words, it can be deadly. And so, take a good hard look at it before you engage in it and what it'll do to you. Your eyes will see strange things, talking about the drunkard, things that, aren't happening. And your heart will utter perverse things. In other words, you'll say things that you won't remember saying. And you'll wish you never said them. Because the inhibitions get broken down, don't they, in our lives. And so there's, yeah, well, I'll tell you a thing or two, and then you regret it a little bit later. Yes, you will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, and so the sea is just tossed up and down and back and forth and up and down, and if you've ever been in that condition and you're laying down, that's what it can feel like you're bobbing up and down in the ocean, and swearing you'll never do that again. Or like one who lies at the top of the mast saying, so the sea is stormy, and you're not only on the boat, but you're way up at the top of the mast, and it's just like this, the whole thing. I mean, what'll happen to you after a couple minutes of that? You're going to get sick. And then they say, after all this, they struck me, but I was not hurt, not at the time. They've beaten me, but I didn't feel it. And they'll feel it later when they wake up. But notice the first thought when they do wake up, but when shall I wake that I may seek another drink? And so he just wakes up, and that's his whole life is just spent thinking of alcohol. It is a terrible thing. How many, you just think about a room this size. How many kids, how many whatever, husbands, wives, and all have really paid a price for that first drink of alcohol someone took. Chapter 24. Do not be envious of evil men. And I like that because it's talking about the inner part of my heart. It's easy for me to say, yeah, I'm not envious of them. But he's talking about the inner part of my heart. Don't be envious of them, nor desire to be with them. Why? Because the price they're going to pay for their wickedness is too high. You won't want to be involved in it. So just steer clear from them. For their heart devises violence, and their lips talk of troublemaking. Verse 3. Through wisdom a house is built, and so a life is compared to a house here. So he's talking about a house, but the idea is a life. Through wisdom a house or a home or a family or a life is built. And by understanding, it's established. By knowledge, and it's talking about wisdom and knowledge that comes from God, the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. The Christian life is the most abundant life there is. It's the greatest life. It's the greatest life. And it's a prosperous life. It really is. Now you can't take it and begin doing goofy doctrines with that. But it's a prosperous life. And it's just a wonderful life. And so lived under the wisdom, lived under God's understanding. Oh, how He fills our lives, how He fills our families, how He fills our homes. It's just excellent, excellent. A wise man is strong. And so we tend to think of strength only in terms of muscles so often. But a wise man is strong in his own way. Yes, a man of knowledge increases strength. For by wise counsel you will wage your own war, and in a multitude of counselors there is safety. So again, a smart guy, all things being equal in some senses, he is going to defeat the guy that's got the big muscles, but he's not smart. Over the long haul, he's going to beat that guy. And it happened in The Princess Bride. You saw it. And there, where he just kind of ran around until he got tired and he fell. We saw the whole thing. And where am I? And then it talks about wise counsel in our lives. It's okay. It's wise to get counsel from godly counselors, and so that we're seeing clearly. And a wise man is someone who understands that, hey, I don't know everything. Let me learn from others who know more about me in that area. Wisdom is too lofty for a fool. In other words, it's beyond him, we would say today. And he does not open his mouth in the gate. And the gate was the place in those cities in Jerusalem where all the judgments would take place. It's where the wise guys would open up their mouths. They were, well, wise guys. The smart, the leaders, they had the wisdom. They would be able to do their judgments. And the guy that he won't accept God's wisdom, and he goes on that scene and he can't speak a word into the thing because it would be embarrassing for him to do that. But he has no desire for the wisdom of God. He who plots to do evil will be called a schemer, and devising of foolishness is sin, and the scoffer is an abomination to men. In other words, nobody respects any of those three kinds of people. Those who plot to do evil, those who devise foolishness, and the scoffer of the things of God. If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. And so sometimes we do faint. Adversity is a time where we find out where our strength is coming from. And so adversity is good that way. And Jacob, you remember that he was in his time of adversity. He was coming back and he was going to meet his brother, and his brother had the big muscles and, was going to break his little neck and the whole thing. So he did his Jacobist to try and work the whole situation. He sent one group this way, and then he sent flocks this way and riches and everything to buy off his brother and all. And then he went across that creek and he wrestled with the Lord all night. And the Lord took and pulled his hip out of joint, and so that he couldn't run anymore. And he couldn't be Jacob anymore, couldn't be old heel catcher, trip up whoever's in front of you and get ahead of them, little con man and all that kind of thing that his name brought. And God changed his name to Israel, ruled by God. And that happens in all of our lives. In all of our lives, we end up with hips pulled out of joint in order that we might discover a strength that is greater than ours. But he's got to remove that ability to run. He's got to remove our options, or we'll never discover his strength. And you might be in that place where you're in that kind of a trial. All your options are gone, and you got both hips out of joint. This is the end of the world. You're going to discover God's strength in that situation. And so when we run out of strength, it's an evidence that I'm operating on my own strength. And I need to discover the strength that is, never tapped out. And that's the Lord's strength. But that's not an easy trial to go through. But we all go through it, and it's good for us. Deliver those who are drawn toward death, and hold back those stumbling to the slaughter. And so it's telling us that we need to take a stand against injustice. And it's important that we take a stand against violence that's against the innocent. And so, let me read it again. Deliver those who are drawn toward death, and hold back those who are stumbling towards the slaughter. And of course, we think about where not only a nation, but a whole world went silent in this generation, in this century, in Nazi Germany. People tried to speak for a while, but they ended up having to leave and get out for their own lives and all. But the world really went quiet on the Jews during that whole period while they were being slaughtered. And so there's a place for a Christian to stand up. The abortion issue is no different today. And so this is one of the proverbs that's used continually. There is a responsibility to stand up in situations where the innocent are being drawn to death, and there are those that are stumbling towards the slaughter. In other words, there is a time where indifference is absolutely inexcusable. We must speak up and be salt and be light. There's the saying, we have it on our Concerned Citizens Board, but it was written by a pastor. He said, they came for the Jews and, nobody spoke up, and then they came for the gypsies, and then they came for the communists, and then finally they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. But he waited too long to speak up and to be counted. And so the necessity of it. Also, and hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. It's a great encouragement as it relates to the gospel, the world heading headlong, to judgment, and we have this message to bring to them. And so we can't be neutral. We can't be neutral in this world. The world won't allow us to be. There are times where you just have to stand up and you have to speak. If you say, surely we did not know this, in other words, we didn't know that was going on, does not God who weighs the hearts consider it? He who keeps your soul, does he not know it? And will he not render to each man according to his deeds? God says, you can't use those excuses because he says, I know you do know. One of the things that both the Americans and the British did when they began to free the concentration camps that the Jews were held in Europe is the American soldiers took all of the German people and the other peoples that were living around these extermination camps, and they brought them into the camps. They forced them with all of their furs and all of their jewelry and all of their everything, and they forced them to come in and see. But they had allowed to go on, and they did not rise up against it. Now, it's a rough place because it reaches a point where it can cost you your life and these kinds of things, but they brought them in. The British were even stronger. The British forced the citizens of the towns to come in and take the dead bodies out, carry them themselves, bury them themselves, unbury some of them, and bury them properly. They made them carry those bodies that died for those 7 or 8 years on the other side of the wall, right in their own neighborhood. And so they would not accept the fact that you didn't know what was going on in here. You know when flesh is burning. You know when hair is burning. And so, again, it's heavy. But there's a time to rise up against what is wrong and to stand against it, and there's a responsibility to do it. My son, verse 13, eat honey because it's good, and the honeycomb which is sweet, and the honeycomb which is sweet to your taste. And so, an exhortation is, he says, so shall the knowledge of wisdom be to your soul. For, if you have found it, there is a prospect, and your hope will not be cut off. He's saying, in other words, enjoy wisdom the way you enjoy honey. And honey was their candy bar. I don't know what your favorite ice cream is, or what your favorite candy bar is, or what everybody's saying. Enjoy wisdom the way that you enjoy that. And there's nothing like a good, scoop ice cream that you like, and boy, it, revives you and invigorates you, and so does wisdom. Do not lie in wait, O wicked man, against the dwelling of the righteous. In other words, to rob them or take advantage of them in a difficult time. Do not plunder his resting place, for a righteous man may fall 7 times, and 7's the number of completion. The righteous man may fall, until he's completely fallen, and he'll rise again. But the wicked man shall fall by calamity. In other words, he'll fall and he'll never get up. One of the great things about the presence of the Lord in our life is we fall. We make mistakes. And I don't care who we are, and we try as hard as we can. Doesn't matter how long we've walked with the Lord. We hit these places where I know what I'm going to try, Lord, to honor you in this situation, and we fall short, don't we? We fall short of what He wants us to exactly be in different situations and all. But because of His presence in our life, He lifts us up. He lifts us up. He never leaves us fallen down there. And that's one of the great differences between a work of the Holy Spirit and then the work of the devil. God never uses condemnation to motivate. Satan always uses condemnation. Boy, look at you. Fell there. Is that about the 6th time you've fallen there? The same thing? Got that figured out yet? No, you'll never get that figured out. He just lays the condemnation on and says, you better not go to God now. You ought to, crawl on your knees from here to Bakersfield or something like that, earn something from God. And always when Satan comes in, it's condemnation to drive me away from God. The Holy Spirit works with conviction, but He'll work in a way that draws me back to the Lord. And then the evil man, he falls and there's no one to pick him up. 2 great examples from the Bible. Peter, he fell 7 times. He fell pretty often, didn't he? And yet, always got back up. Judas, though, he fell, and that was it. The difference between the two. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls. And that's hard, isn't it? They've been, just wiping you out for so long, and now finally, they fall, and the tendency in the flesh is to rejoice in it. But there should be a humility about it, and only the Lord can do that. And do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles. There has to be that understanding that where he is, I've been there too. And if it wasn't for the grace of God, I would be where he is right now. And so, when I understand that my life, everything about my life is because of God's unmerited favor, then it takes that boasting out, and it takes that rejoicing when the enemy falls out of my life. Lest the Lord see it, and it displeases him, and it does displease him, and he turn away his wrath from him. Do not fret because of evildoers. That's always timely, isn't it? Don't worry because of evildoers. What do you mean, don't worry because of evildoers? Nor be envious of the wicked, for there will be no prospect for the evil man. They don't have any future. They don't have anything to look forward to, and the lamp of the wicked will be put out. My son, fear the Lord and the king. In other words, have a respect for the institution of government, even if some people that are in that institution can't be respected. Do not associate with those given to change. In other words, don't join rebellions against the government. Anarchy and, all right, let's burn the whole thing, the White House and the State Department and the whole, don't join in with that kind of stuff.
For their calamity will rise suddenly. A lot of times the revolution goes and then it gets turned around quickly, and who knows the ruin that those two can bring. And so just wise counsel. God wants us to be good citizens in the country that He's put us in, to be good citizens, and not to rebel against the government unless the government demands that we do something contrary to the Word of God, and then we have to obey God over man. And so he says, just steer clear of all that stuff. Why? Stay busy about the Great Commission. It's not like we're going to be idle. Don't sweat all that stuff and get involved in a big rebellion and all. Just keep getting the the gospel out there. Make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Give your life to that, and don't get caught in all of that other stuff. These things also belong to the wise. It is not good to show partiality in judgment, and he who says to the wicked, you are righteous, in other words, they let the guilty go free, him the people will curse, and nations will abhor him. When you let the guilty go free long enough, you frustrate the citizenship. People get frustrated, and they begin to get angry, and unrest starts to occur. But those who rebuke the wicked will have delight, and a good blessing will come upon them. He who gives a right answer kisses the lips. That's what a right answer is like. You ever get just a right answer? It's like your wife kissed you. Yeah. It's just right. A good kiss. And so they both feel good. And so the right answer, and also has the idea of when a judge gives the right answer too. It's just, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. Prepare your outside work and make it fit for yourself in the field, and afterward build your house. And so Solomon is speaking and saying, have the right priorities in establishing your house. In other words, he's speaking to the young man, and he tells him here, prepare your outside work, get a job. Get a job. Don't marry before you have a job. Don't marry before you have a means of supporting the household. Make fit for yourself in the field. In other words, get a job and begin to work there, get those things in order, and then afterward build your house. Afterward, get married. And it's just good, sound advice, isn't it? And so often today, it's just like, person falls in love and then, well, let's get married next week and everything. You got a job? I don't have a job. You ever had a job? I never had a job. I never had a job. Well, there must be a program to cover us, and let's go. And so the whole thing is personal responsibility. Just personal responsibility. There's a right way to do things. There's a responsible way to do things, and that is set these things in place and then get married. Be responsible. Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause, and so no false accusations. For would you deceive with your lips? Do not say, I will do to him just as he has done to me, and I'll render to the man according to his work. And so God forbids vengeance, and God says, I'll repay. I'll do better than you could ever do. So leave it with me. That doesn't mean vengeance. All right, he's going to smoke a man because here's what I would do, and you'll do better. Oh, man. Can I video it? And God may end up saving him, which is a lot better. And, you may have to deal with that for a day or two, but you'll understand it was the best way. I went by the field of the slothful, the lazy person. The lazy person, Solomon, I think you'd get fired in his kingdom pretty quickly if you're lazy. I went by the field of the slothful and by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding. And there it was. It was just a mess, all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles. The stone wall was broken down all around it. And when I saw it, I considered it well. And I like this because Solomon was just saying, as he looked at all of this, he just said, open up your eyes and learn from life. Look at the lazy person and look at the kind of life they have. You don't need a book on that. Just watch them. Just watch life. And life will teach you a lot about sowing and reaping. And so he says, when I saw it, I considered it well, and I looked on it, and I received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and so your poverty will come like a prowler, and your want like an armed man. And so the laziness, again, condemned. Here's a person that loves sleep more than work. Why? Because they've got, what is that, narcolepsy or whatever? No, it's not because of that. They're just lazy. It's just lazy. And so he says, poverty is going to come your way. It's the end of the lazy person.